Welcome to the Fourth Step Podcast. On each episode, we interview recovering addicts and learn their story with addiction. Through exploring personal journeys, we get a glimpse of the depths addicts fall to and their path in recovery. We hope you enjoy the episode.
Hello, everyone. My name is Kevin, and I am an addict.
Hi, Kevin.
Hi. And this episode, we're recording in just outside of St. George, Utah. We're in southern Utah. There's a convention this weekend, and my wife and I flew out to go to the convention, and so she can see her sponsor that lives in Ivins, Utah. And to set the story here, 17 years ago, or a little over 17 years ago, I was looking for a sponsor, and my wife was looking for a sponsor at the same time. And I was the main speaker coordinator for Northern California Convention, and we were doing a workshop with listening to speakers, and we heard Roseanne's CD. Geez, it might have even been a tape. That's how long ago it was. And anyways, we picked her, and I told my wife, you got to hear this woman share. She's amazing, and I think she'd be a great sponsor. And the same story is, my wife says, I'll take care of that myself. I don't need to be given a sponsor. And so long story short, they met that weekend, and the rest is history, sponsor and sponsee. So our guest today is
Roseanne from Utah, southern Utah.
Welcome, Roseanne.
Do you want me to talk now, or are you going to ask me? I'm waiting for you to ask me questions.
Yeah. So first of all, I want to thank all our listeners. We have a couple people that send in money monthly, and if anybody feels the desire to support the show, you can do that on whatever platform that you listen to the podcast. And there's some link in there to support, and I think the lowest donation per month could be $3, or whatever you want. That, and our co-host Josh wasn't able to fly out this weekend to do the podcast, so I'm flying solo. So, Roseanne, we'll start out with what's your clean date, and how many years do you have clean?
Okay. Hi, Kevin. Thank you so much for the invitation.
Yeah.
I really appreciate you. My clean date is October 21st, 10/21/81. So I have 43 years clean and going on 44. Yeah.
That's a long time.
That is a long time.
Yeah.
It's a long, beautiful time.
It is, yeah, and I could testify to the fact that you have a wake of women behind you that you have helped stay clean, and as quiet as is kept, a lot of those times you've saved women's lives and men. I'll say that also. So. What we do here, and you know the format, we're doing a 4-step podcast. We're going to ask you 4-step questions, but we also like to get down to childhood stuff. If you remember it, and if not, it's not a big deal, but we'll get to the point where trauma, or if there is no trauma, then whatever caused you to have that first feeling of getting loaded, where this is taking away all my pain. So where'd your childhood start, where that you can remember that? Was it painful? And was there any trauma?
Well, it's funny we should start there because that's exactly where we started when I wrote my first 4th step. We didn't have the literature that we have now, the guideline for the 4th step, and so that's where I started, as far back as I could remember. And it's the same today. As far back as I could remember, I was a little girl. I was about 3 years old. And I just remember having this fluffy, pretty dress on and patent leather shoes. And I was standing in the middle of a room in my house. And I was going around in a circle, and I was crying. And I remember I was crying because I felt somebody made fun of me. Now, I don't know if they were laughing because I was crying or I was crying because they had made fun of me. But that was as far back as I could remember. It was like an isolated incident. I think my mom and her husband, my dad that raised me, was there. And I don't remember anything after that. I don't remember what I did to make it happen or, anything it may have affected. But that is the first memory? That I have of my life.
When you said dad that raised you, what do you mean by that?
Well, I've had 2 fathers. And I never knew who my real father was.
Your biological father?
My biological father. And what I remembered about fathers was that maybe I was about 5 or 6 years old. And I remember this man, his name was Jack, and he was my father. And he spoiled me. I was really under his wing. And he'd sit and talk with me. And then around that time, there was another man that would come to visit our house, and I would go and sit out in the car with him and visit with him, and that, I was told, was my other dad. And so the dad in the car said, "I'm your father," and I actually had his last name. But when I went in and told my dad in the house, Jack, what Steve had said, he said, "No, I'm your father."
That must have caused some confusion.
It caused extreme confusion for many, many years. And it wasn't until I came into recovery that I really got in touch with, today, it really doesn't matter. They were both really good to me. I felt I was their like little princess or little, favorite.
They spoiled you?
And, well, they didn't... The way I felt, I knew they loved me.
Okay.
I knew they loved
description.
me. Yeah. I felt it. I felt that each of them loved me. And I was really confused because I really wanted to give some extra honor to my real father, but I was the only one that was really confused about it because nobody else didn't seem to bother them, except every once in a while my dads would remind me that they were my real father. And there was conflict with my mother about that for years and years because she would say, "What difference does it make?"
Yeah. Did you, at what point did you realize or just get a clue about what biological father means? Did that ever come up? Did she tell you the story of how they got divorced?
She never told me the story.
Okay.
I never knew. Anything that I know today was stuff I figured out. But at the time, I was the second youngest of 6 children. And my brothers and sisters before me, I had a younger brother. But the brothers and sisters before me, their real dad was Steve. And they called Jack, and I called Jack Daddy and Steve Daddy. So I knew at some point I figured it out in my head. Nobody ever sat me down.
So that might have caused some confusion in early childhood. Was there any, some people have trauma in their lives that they don't recognize. Looking back now with everything that you've learned through all the years, do you look back and see that? And you don't even have to call it trauma. You can say, well, this, getting picked on by your older siblings, or the fact that your mom never talked about your real father, explaining the situation, or any of the stuff in your childhood that you look back in and go, wow, that might have had a trigger.
I do look back. I mean, I even recently, I was looking at a picture of mine when I was a little girl, and I looked at the picture and I thought, wow, you really did some suffering. Because I always felt like I was kind of living in the world by myself. I was figuring out everything as I went. I was much younger than my older brothers and sisters, so they were off doing their thing, and I was just an extra person in the house. My mother and dad both worked, so I did a lot, a lot on my own. I figured out a lot of things on my own. I was really a loner at a very, very young age. but I would figure it out.
Even with you had 4 older siblings?
I had 2 sisters and 2 brothers.
Even with them around, you still felt alone?
Well, they weren't really around because my brothers they were all like 8 and 10 years older than me.
Oh, okay.
So when I got to be, where maybe I would question something. I was already used to them not being around. My sister used to run away all the time. So my mother was busy giving her picture to the police department so they could find her, and I remember that. My other brothers and sisters were, my brothers were going into the Army. My other sister, I don't know where she was at the time. And I just remember when I was younger, I was alone.
Wow.
And I'd come home from school, and my mother was working, and her hours were 3 in the afternoon to 11 at night.
Holy cow! So you got a lot of free time for yourself,
right? And then the next morning, when I'd wake up, she was asleep, and I'd go to school all on my own, and do whatever. I was really a great student in school. I loved it. And I would come home, and my dad would work too, and I'd come home, and he would just, maybe be sitting around playing solitaire or something. But, I was a loner. I was just a little kid all by herself growing up.
So you grew up pretty self-sufficient.
Very.
Yeah. Did that carry on into later in life? You always felt self-sufficient?
I felt self-sufficient. I felt like I was in my own world. And the world that I was in, not that nobody else was there, but this is how I felt with all that stuff going around me. I didn't feel resentful that no one was home with me. I didn't feel resentful because, I did feel resentful because I didn't know who my father was. That carried with me. But I would just make up things. I would fantasize.
Yeah.
I was really good at school. And after school, I would stay and do all my homework for the next day. And I would get compliments from the teacher. And then I would go home. And I had a couple of girlfriends. And every once in a while, I was like the third wheel. So sometimes they would be my friend and sometimes they wouldn't. And it just didn't, after a while, it just didn't matter. I would just make up that life is good. I always believed in God. I believe that God was beautiful and wonderful and kind and loving and everything was good.
Did they take you to church on Sunday?
Interesting that you would ask that question. My brothers and sisters were all in Catholic school, and I don't remember being in Catholic school when I was younger, but we would go to church. And as I got older, like maybe 10, 12 years old, my parents would give me the envelope to put in the basket, the money for church. And then at the end, they never went though. But really? I would go and put in the basket. And then at the end of the year, they would, have this big bulletin about, what families, donated what money. And then I remember, probably it was about 13, something like that. And it, the bulletin came out and there was no money donated. And, and I was confronted. I don't remember what happened.
Oh, from you?
Yeah.
Oh.
And what I did with that money, I used to give it to my friends. I used to buy gifts for them. And friends, I just mean people that I knew from school. They didn't come to my house and hang out. I didn't go to their house to hang out. I just knew them in the neighborhood. It was a little town,
Yeah. Yeah, that's funny you say that because you're not alone. There's a lot of people, myself included, have done that in childhood. Somehow got some money and, bought candy or whatever, or just handed out money, which was interesting. I didn't realize it at the time, but yeah, so that's funny. So during your childhood, nothing really prominent stood out except that, the dads and you feeling alone.
Mm-hmm. And anytime, sometimes there were family picnics and maybe cousins would come and I'd just be off by myself. And I was okay. I was okay with it.
Yeah.
There'd just be a lot of people around me. And I never really knew or felt the substance of family life. I never felt connected. I knew I had a mother and father. I knew I had brothers and sisters. But I don't really think I ever knew what that was all about. or if it was, that it was meaningful and that you had someone to take care of you and have fun with. I never did. We never did family things.
Yeah, that's so relatable. I mean, like I grew up with my dad and stepmom, and then two older brothers, and for me it was very traumatic. But I never felt I fit in because I grew up as like the black sheep of the family, so I can relate. Which is interesting because I was always in search of the nurturing comfort of a family, and I didn't find that until I got into the program, until I got clean. So I can relate with you.
Yeah.
Do you remember the first time you got loaded?
Yes. So what was happening, I just want to add this, what was happening that tells the whole story up until the time I was, tells the story. I was 14 years old. No, I was about maybe 10, 11, 12. And I was coming home from school one day, and I was jumping up the street. And what I would do is I would buy penny suckers, and I would pass them out to, like, kids would be on the side of the road because I lived up a long street. And I would give these suckers out to these kids, and I'd be skipping up the road feeling wonderful. 10, 12 years old, feeling wonderful. And I remember the day, and I believe this day was the day that addiction entered my life.
Oh, really?
And I'm jumping up the street, I'm giving out all these suckers, feeling amazing. And I walked in the house, and my mother was there in the kitchen. And I said, "Hi, Mom," like I always did, and was so excited to be home. And she turned and she looked at me, and she said, "What is wrong with you?" She said, "You are not like my other children. Something is wrong with you." And I remember in recovery, I had no recollection of this until recovery, until I did some work. But I remember standing there, and my first thought was, something is wrong with me. What is wrong with me?
Wow.
And I think I bought a package that became a great amount of the rest of my life,
You bought a package?
Well, I mean, I bought the message. I felt like she was saying something's wrong with me. And I was trying to figure out what is wrong with me. And oh my goodness, something's wrong with me. I bought that,
Yeah.
I bought that message, and I thought something's wrong with me. And that's where, I'm not good enough. Nobody loves me. That's where all of that started. Uh-huh. And I remember feeling crushed. And I thought to myself, what do I do now? Because that was my sole belief. I believed that to my inner core, that I was a beautiful, perfect, loving child of a higher power, and that I was perfect, and life was good, and God was good, and everything was okay, in spite of what was going around me, which I wasn't even aware of a lot of it. I think I don't know, had the magic of tuning it out, or the misfortune, or whatever. But I remember that. And then I remember that's where a lot of confusion started. And, and I didn't feel like the happy-go-lucky kid anymore. I didn't feel the strength. I didn't feel happiness. I don't know what happened for the next couple of years. But when I was 14, I started, some kids started hanging out at this bar. And I knew they went to this bar. And they were like maybe 16, 17 years old. And they asked me one time, "Do you want to go with us?" And I thought, oh, it's so exciting, And I said yes. So I was 14 years old. I remember going to the bar. It was in the neighborhood. And climbing through the window, because they used to ask at the door how old you are, and you went in. And like I said, the other kids were a little older than me. They had fake, I guess, IDs. I don't know. They got in. They said, "You can't come in. You have to climb through the window." So I remember climbing through the window. And that was the first time I drank. And I didn't get a buzz, nothing. It was nothing. But, a chemical went in my system.
Yeah.
And then after that, a lot of confusion. I started slipping grades at school. And a lot. I asked my mother a lot, do you love me? And she would say, this was throughout my, younger years. And she would say, of course I do. You're my child. And I said, no. Do you really love me for me? Like if I was a neighbor down the street, would you love me? And she said, don't be so silly. You're my daughter. Of course I love you. That was the only message I ever got. The message I got about my two fathers was, what difference does it make? So I guess I would just pretend stuff after that, or it didn't even matter anymore.
Fantasy. Sounds like fantasy became your first addiction.
Oh, it was my first addiction. Yeah. Oh, I loved it. Yes, I wanted to be a movie star or a mother. And then I thought, well, I'll just be a mother movie star. A movie star with kids.
That's funny.
So I started drinking. I drank that night, and I remember going home, and my mother was finding out I drank, and she went into a rage and started beating me. And my brother was home, and he stopped her. And my mother would hit me from time to time. Maybe in my lifetime she hit me maybe 4 or 5 times, but each time they were beatings.
Yeah.
And somebody would pull her off because she was just so rageful.
Really? Did she show rage in other areas throughout your life? Just around you? Mm-hmm. So that's probably a deep-rooted trigger.
Well, for her, I found out, of course, afterwards that she had a sister, and she and her sister were separated. And when she was married to an alcoholic, and it was an arranged marriage where they paid for my mother,
family?
Yeah, Steve's family paid, for him to marry.
Where was this at?
In Poland.
Oh, okay.
Mm-hmm. They were from Poland.
Yeah.
But they got married here. My mother was 14 years old, and she came from a big family, and they were all scattered, went into different homes and everything. So I remember when I did my first 4th step, and my most awakening moment was I wrote an inventory about my mother as far back as I could remember our relationship. And my sponsor wanted me to write it because I had a daughter that I gave up for adoption. And anyway, so my sponsor thought I had some feelings I really needed to deal with about my mother. And I didn't. I loved my mother.
Yeah.
And I didn't process it and say, well, whatever. So I did the inventory, and I remember my sponsor saying, well, don't you have any feelings about your mother? She made you give up your baby and didn't ask you anything. And I said, no, I love my mother, And then I kept thinking, did I not love her? What's the deal? And so anyway, I wrote this inventory. I really got into it. I shared it with my sponsor. And when I was finished with my inventory, we went to a barbecue pit, and I went to burn it. And I went to the 4 corners and lit the 4 corners, and it wouldn't go up in flames. And I just, took a deep breath. I was frustrated. And I said to myself, it just won't go. And I tried it again, and it wouldn't light up, it wasn't damp or anything. And then I just looked at my sponsor's face. I remember looking right in her eyes, and I said, you know what, Jody? My mother did the best that she could with what she had. Mm-hmm. She didn't know any better. And the minute I said that, the inventory went up in flames, and I started forgiving myself about my own kids.
Yeah.
Because I thought to myself, I said, Jody, and I did the best I could with what I had.
Absolutely. And
it was the first time I really saw myself as a human being, and I didn't know I was forgiving myself at the time, but that's when it started for me. When I really took a look at myself as me, as a woman, and, I didn't have all these thoughts about suffering, and I went through my own thing, and,
yeah.
And I thought, yeah, and I did the best I could too. So that was one of the greatest gifts that I got in recovery, and I started again. Of course, I build on that with, all the gifts we received.
Right. So, yeah. But your teenage years, you're in high school, you're drinking. When did you start doing drugs?
I had gotten married, I got pregnant.
So this is after high school?
Yes.
Okay, so you're out of high school and up until then?
I actually quit high school my sophomore year. I was going to a Catholic academy, and I would miss school. My mother didn't know, and anyway, and every year they would send an invitation to your family inviting you back to school the next year, and if they didn't get the letter, then you didn't go back, and so I just I didn't go to school. I quit school. I wasn't going anymore. And then they sent my mother a letter like, "Where's your daughter?" And and we're not inviting her back next year. And I had quit, and just roamed the streets or did whatever I did. I don't even remember,
Hey,
and that was it. So sophomore was my last year of school. I didn't even finish my sophomore year.
I went to. I'm not Catholic, but I went to a Catholic school. So my freshman year, Catholic high school, the parents got the invitation to come to the school, and we went into the dean's office, and he said, "We're not inviting Kevin back next year." So it was, high five. That was the last year that I actually completed a grade. It was my freshman year because of that.
Yeah.
After that, it just went downhill.
Me too.
But
just
for
downhill.
you, So drugs came in after you got out of high school?
Well, so 15, I'm still going to this bar off and on again, and I'm trying to think. And I meet this guy that used to hang out at our school. I thought he was so cool, and anyway, I saw him at the bar one night, and he asked me to go out in the backseat of a car with him, and I did, and then of course I got pregnant. Never told my mother. I lived at home every single day, and that was the time I quit school. My mother never asked me anything, and I was about 6.5 months pregnant. I had a big fight with my mother, argument about something. She came in my bedroom with my sister, and she said to me, "Are you pregnant?" And I just took a deep breath. I thought, finally. Because I was wearing tight clothes. I was trying to hide it. You know. I was a loner anyway, so it wasn't like I was in the middle of a crowd of kids or anything, because I was a loner. And I said, "Yes, I am." And my mother said to me, another experience like the day I came home from school, she said to me, "How could you do this to me? I wish the ground would open up and take me." And I thought, how could I do this to my mother?
Yep.
So a couple weeks later, so my mother said, she didn't say anything. That was it. I cried that night. And she had worked for this really exclusive restaurant. She was a cook. And she went to her boss and I guess told her, everything. The boss said, "Well, we'll take care of it, And my mother said, "Why didn't you tell me earlier? We could have, had an abortion." Now, this is how naive I was at that age. I mean, really.
Yeah.
I said, "Oh, my mother knows about abortion." Because I saw her as this, saintly woman. That was the fantasy.
Saintly woman that didn't actually go into the church?
Yeah, I did. Well, because I wanted everything to be perfect.
Yeah.
Everything. I didn't want to think of that, because then I probably would have had to feel it, and. But so anyway, so they made arrangements with an attorney, and for me to have an adoption. My mother never said, "Who's the father? Do you want the baby?" Nothing, So, and the neighbors never found out. And because I was hiding out at the house, and so nobody found out. And so 2 weeks later, I was watching Elvis Presley on the Ed Sullivan Show. It was his debut.
You're dating yourself.
It was September 10th, in 1956, and I started getting some cramps. And my brother was there, and my brother took me to the hospital. My mother said, "I can't go. I can't go." So my brother took me to the hospital, and they registered me and whatever. But they rushed me right to a bed. I just remember that. And about 20 minutes later, I had a baby.
Wow.
I had a baby girl.
That was fast.
And I told myself, God really loves me, because there was no pain, and the neighbors never found out.
Wow.
See, so those are messages, those are things I was telling myself in my head.
You didn't have like ideal teachers either.
No, I had no one.
Yeah, that's what I'm
I
saying.
had my imagination.
Yeah. So that's really, really interesting because there's the stigma in that age. But you took that perspective that like God loved you because of these reasons. And the stigma on the outside would be like, you're a horrible person.
Yeah.
Well,
I was thinking probably all those other things, briefly or whatever.
Yeah.
But I had to tell myself something to get through it. And Kevin, I think what I was telling myself was the truth.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it was in your heart.
20-minute labor.
That's
20-minute
unheard
labor.
of.
Yeah.
Unheard of.
20-minute labor, and the neighbors never found out because that was the concern about the neighbors. And we'll never talk about it again.
You had to look good on the outside.
And guess what? We never talked about it again.
Really?
I never talked about it until I came into recovery.
And your mom never brought it up?
Nobody ever brought it up.
And nobody at this time ever asked you how you felt?
No one ever. The attorney came in the hospital.
The attorney?
The attorney came to the hospital because I had to sign the adoption papers.
Oh, okay.
So he came to the hospital and, he said, I'm Mr. So-and-so and I've got some papers here and everything. And I thought to myself in my head, see, I remember these things clearly. Not a lot of details in life, but there's certain things like crystal clear. And I thought, oh, that's okay. I'll sign these papers. It doesn't matter because I'm only 16 years old now. And it's not legal because I'm not of legal age. That's what I thought to myself. So it's okay. I can sign these papers. And when I'm 18, I'm going to go and get this baby back.
Huh. Little did you know, that doesn't work.
It doesn't. It didn't work when I was 18, yeah.
So that whole experience, did that cause you some pain of like loss or?
It caused me pain. In the hospital, my arms literally hurt. I could feel them because I wanted to hold that baby.
Oh.
And they literally hurt. And it was 2 days later, and I thought, oh, if I could just hold her, And that was it. They took the baby. I stayed, I think, a couple more days in the hospital. But I will tell you, 27 years later, she found me.
That's a good story. Maybe we'll get to that. So I want to get to the part where you're getting into hard drugs.
Okay.
And when you get out on your own, how did that story work out?
Okay, so I was, like I said, I was drinking off and on again. I wasn't drinking, addicted to drinking or anything. Just once in a while, I'd go to that bar or another bar or something, have a drink or something, and just to be a part of and to hang out with the kids. And I met this guy, and I don't even know. I think it was a blind date or something. But I met this guy, and he, was a good guy, square, and I got pregnant again. And I told him, and I figured, oh, this is perfect. He's going to be my husband.
Yeah.
So we got married.
Still with the fantasy storybook. Yeah.
So we got married, and quickly because I was pregnant. But of course, we didn't tell my parents, anybody I was pregnant. But anyway, so somebody in his family gave me a gown from one of their people. It was just like I didn't ever have the beautiful big wedding and I was always in the background. And it's not like poor me, but it's just that that was what was happening. And when I look back, I think, God, Roseanne, you poor kid, but you're a survivor, that's what I tell myself. But so anyway, I got pregnant, we got married, I had a beautiful son. It was just, and again, I had another easy pregnancy. It was more than 20 minutes. It was a couple of hours only, though. Yeah, and it had this beautiful little baby boy. And then my husband and I we didn't connect at all. I mean, he would never have married me if I wasn't pregnant. It just wasn't his cup of tea or anything. And so I try to do it. I try to keep up housework and all that. And I didn't know how to do any of that. And
how old were you at the time?
I was 18. I got married when I was 18. I had the baby when I was 19. Or still 18 probably. And then within a month I got pregnant again with a daughter. But now by this time I had been hanging out at bars. I wasn't coming home. The baby would stay with my mother-in-law, for a couple of days or weekend. They loved my son. And then this part becomes confusing because the next thing that I clearly remember, and it must have been after I had my daughter, but it's just very cloudy because I was running around a lot, and my mother would never watch my kids. She said, "You made your bed, you lay in it."
Wow.
That was her response.
Some good support there.
Yeah, of course, hardcore. And so anyway, I one day was driving my husband's Cadillac. We had money. He owned a gas station. Hard worker.
Okay.
20 hours a day. Just work,
square
work.
too, huh?
For a while, we lived with his parents. They were Italian from the old country, and they were definitely family, I never cooked, never. I still don't cook, but I never cooked. We would go to his mother's every single night to eat. And we lived after we moved out of his parents' house, we moved into a house that his parents owned. So I don't ever know about paying rent, paying bills. I never did any of that. I just went shopping, hung out with, a couple of girlfriends, went to bars, and it started to get really crazy then. So one day I was driving down the street wherever I was going, and I saw Mondo. Mondo was the father of my first baby. And he was hot. I mean, he was hot in high school. He used to hang around school. And so I'm driving down the street, and, I'm dressed nice. I live in a nice place. I got these two beautiful kids, husband, although we're not getting along. Days would go by. We wouldn't even talk to each other,
Yeah.
I did what I wanted, spent whatever kind of money I wanted. I was off running on my own again,
control.
Making believe. And I see these two guys walking down the street. One was Mondo, and I found out later the other guy was Vinny, and that was his partner. And at the time, I knew Mondo used drugs. I mean, he had used drugs, when I had the baby. And so I knew he used drugs and all that, and I thought he was a hotshot, big-time dealer, but he really wasn't. I used to tell people he was, but he wasn't. He was just, he was walking.
Yeah.
He was walking, so I pulled over, and I invited them in the car. I said, "Where are you going?" They said they were going downtown. They were going to this hotel, and it was on, the west side, which was, the kind of the rough side of Buffalo. And
this is Buffalo, New York?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And so I picked them up. I took them down there. We get to the hotel. I parked the car. It's a sleaze bag hotel. Rickety elevator, dark, dirty, gloomy. And we go up to this room, and I'm sitting there, and when I think that, on this dirty couch, and I'm looking around, thinking, oh my God,
Yeah.
And they go in the bathroom. And I knew drugs were bad, and I knew you get hooked and all that. But anyway, so he came out of the bathroom, and he sat down next to me, and he said, "Put out your arm." And I put out my arm.
So heroin?
Heroin.
So the very first hard drug you ever did was heroin. You didn't mess around. Mm-mm. You went straight to the good stuff.
And I used heroin probably for, I'm just going to throw it out there, maybe 10, 15 years without adding anything to it. That was it. That was the drug.
Heroin.
Mm-hmm. And that day I got really, really, really sick, throwing up everything. I dropped them off wherever. I went home. I was so sick and everything. And then I think the next couple of days, he called me, or I was meeting him someplace or something. But that was it, Kevin. I was off and running, and I was 19 then. And I think I just had my daughter, Shelley, but I couldn't remember whether I had my baby after that, but I don't think so, because no, I had to have had her, So, and the only reason I say I had to have had her, because I don't remember being pregnant with her and using during that whole time,
Okay,
I remember. And then that was it. I started using. It was off and on again. I never learned how to, cook up or anything. I thought if you put more water in the spoon, then you're getting more drugs. I mean, that's how naive I was, Kevin. And so then we'd meet, and my husband and I separated then, and he got me the really fancy schmancy apartment and money and all that. And so I was separated from my husband.
Did your husband find out? Did
he
he have an idea?
He probably knew something. Every once in a while we'd be mad and we'd be separated, and I'd bring some dude home that I met, and one time he caught me, and so he knew. I mean, he knew I was playing around. And they were nobody was familiar with heroin, I went on the west side of town where the blacks were and a lot of, Italians, but like, families that I had, and they didn't know anything about disease of addiction, or, I had a couple of brothers that were alcoholic and, throughout life and that. But so anyway, so I started using, and I started using heavier and heavier, and I had my kids, and he'd come to the house, and I'd give him all kinds of money and everything. And it was just a nightmare. And then after a couple of years, because it was off and on, it was when he would bring it to me, or I would take him to the connection and wait outside. And then after a couple of years, he got busted, and he went away. He went, I think, for a few days or something until his trial and that. And I got sick for the first time.
Really?
And I knew then that I was addicted. I mean, I had been addicted, but that was the first time. It was about between a year and a half, 2 years after I started using. And I thought, the next time he goes to Ted's house, I'm going in with him, because I wanted to meet these people. Because the next time he got busted, I wanted to be able to go myself.
Yeah.
So that's when the love was affected. You know what I mean? That's when the addiction was already in my world. So I did. I went and met Ted and Annette, and these are black people and beautiful, kind, loving addicts. And they were older, like 40, 50, and I remember Teddy used to have shoes with a rubber band around them, and I used to think to myself, how did I get here? Or the first time I used, I thought that in that hotel, I thought, how did I get, I thought, my mother would kill me. Huh. She would kill me if she knew. Because I knew better, you know what I mean? I was aware, I had some class, because in spite of not having guidance or teaching or anything, I figured out a lot of things myself, and got through things, and I was, I don't want to say professional, but I was, I looked like, I had a good upbringing and all that stuff. So anyway, but I loved that world I was in, because everybody just loved each other, and it wasn't I didn't feel uncomfortable or anything.
That's the heroin world.
Yeah, I didn't feel uncomfortable. I just felt like these are really nice people, so I'd get high. I'd want to clean their houses, because sometimes heroin had the opposite effect on me. I would always nut out, but and then I started to learn how to hit myself, because I thought, oh no, I'm not going to get caught the next time he gets busted sick. Huh. So then that was my game. My game was to meet addicts so that I could go cop, and they wouldn't think I was the man or something, because I was white in a black neighborhood. And so that was my introduction really to the field. And that's really, that was my life. And then, after, some other stuff happened, I got involved in coke and freebasing and stuff like that. But, and then at the end, of course, whatever I could get. whatever I could get. And if I, turned a trick or something, I would just hope that they would give me some money afterwards, because my self-esteem was so low, I wouldn't even ask them for money.
How did you end up in California?
Well,
in L.A.,
right,
of all places.
Well, okay, so I was with Mondo from 18 to 25, and I got busted. 25.
In New York?
Or 23, 5 years later, after using all this heroin and learning how to use it and everything in Buffalo. At 23, I got arrested. I turned a trick with the cop. And, by then I started to go out to make some money because, Mondo would...
You had to pay for it.
Well, he was getting busted, too. And then we were using more and more. And, So anyway, so I turned a trick with this cop. And he took me downtown. And, there were other cops there and everything. And they called me in an office and that. And they wanted this dealer. His name was JC. And they wanted this main dealer in Buffalo. And I knew him. I knew, we all got drugs from him. And they wanted me to testify against him. And I said, And I remember sitting there thinking, I was like a wannabe gangster. I mean, really, because I'm really this mushy, this naive person.
Yeah.
But always, wanting to. So I said, no, I'm not going to give him up. And they said, well, you're going to go to the penitentiary if you don't. And I said, And I'm thinking in my head, no, I'm not giving Mondo up. No, I'm not going to be one of those. No, I'm not a snitch. First time busted. And they said, we're gonna promptly take you to jail if you don't, And I said, well, then you're going to have to, because I'm not giving him up. And they put me in jail. I got sick. Oh, I was kicking on the floor. I was so sick. And by then, I had lost the kids. I went down real quick then. My husband took the kids. He had the kids. His mother was raising them. And, wait a minute. I think I left a strong part out. I don't know. I get so confused, Kevin.
That's okay.
But yeah, it's at some point, Mondo got busted. Oh, that's what happened. Mondo got busted. I know I blocked it out because it's always been so painful.
Oh.
During that 5 years, I had been at my mother's and I had my kids with me. And I was still separated from my husband. I was still using, but I still had my kids with me. And I went to my mother's and I was so loaded. And Mondo called, I don't know, something, but I knew Mondo was out front, my mother's. And he was waiting for me or going to meet me there or something. And I had my kids with me. And he said, and he was out waiting for me. And I knew he had dope in the car.
Okay.
I knew he had scored. So I said to my mother, I said, Mom, I have to go to the doctor's. I'm going to leave my kids with you. And I started to walk out the door. I kissed and hugged my kids, and my son was hanging on to me. Mommy, don't go, don't go. And that day, Mondo, Vinny, and I left for California. And that was the day I left my kids.
Wow. So the addiction was stronger than that pull.
So we drove to California.
That's heavy, huh?
Pardon me?
That's heavy.
Very heavy.
Yeah.
Well, that's why I say when I share my story, I say I left my kids for a bag of dope. Yeah. Not for Mondo, because I could give less about him.
No, you already had a connection.
It was the dope.
Yeah.
So we went to California, and we were there. I think it was the second day he got busted. And I'm out in California all by myself. And I called my mother, and I said, Mom, I'm so sorry. I'm in California. And, I told her, I think she was somewhat aware, She was aware I was using, but she didn't know what or how heavy or anything. And I said, I want to come back and get my kids. And she said, your kids are gone. I said, what do you mean they're gone? She said, Russ came and got them. She said, I can't raise your kids. I didn't know where you were. So I never got my kids back again. I tried to go get them at his mother's and stuff, and I was loaded every time I went, so of course they wouldn't let me. my husband called one time about going to an attorney, signing some divorce papers and custody papers, and he was going to give me $200. I was right on it. I said, I'll meet you at your attorney's office.
Wow.
I went, and he gave me $200. I signed whatever. I said, just give me whatever.
Huh.
And then I got back from California, and my mother sent me a ticket or money or whatever. I got back, and I continued to use, and that's when I turned to trick with, the feds and the narcotic squad, and I got busted, and they wanted me to turn Mondo in, and he was back in town because they had,
right,
extradited him, and I said no, and so they charged me with pimping and procuring.
Okay.
Like a madam. I don't even know if they have that charge anymore. They have something like it, but I don't think that. But they charged me with pimping and procuring and under the influence. And I got a 1 to 3 year sentence.
Uh-huh.
And I went to jail in New York City. And I remember when I got there were matrons. They didn't call them officers. They were matrons, the police, and they said, what is a nice girl like you doing here?
Yeah.
Because I still looked presentable. I still looked good. I didn't I did not look like an addict. I mean, I just, could pull it together and talk the good talk. And because I had done all this fantasy, I guess. I don't know. So I was there for a year and a half.
So were you in jail for a year, or did you actually do a prison? You did a prison sentence.
Yeah.
That's what I thought.
Prison. Yeah.
What prison?
In New York. Well, it was Western Field Reformatory for Women. And then part of it was changed into Bedford Hills. So now it's Bedford Hills Prison. It's,
Okay, so you did a prison term.
Mm-hmm. So then they didn't want to parole me back to Buffalo because they knew Mondo was probably back out on the streets. And they said there's too many drugs in Buffalo. So I asked for parole to California because my sister Tony lived there. And so instead of sending me back to Buffalo, where there's so many drugs and Mondo was back on the street, they sent me to California.
Where there's no drugs, right?
So I went to California. I lived with my sister and her husband didn't want me there at all because I was a junkie.
Yeah. I think the cops in Buffalo just didn't want you in town.
Yeah.
They didn't want to deal with you.
Well, I was the only white girl in Buffalo that used.
So to get to the forward part of this story, so I wanted to hear about that walk on Watts.
In Watts.
When you ended, because I remember, when I met you, 18, 19 years ago, I literally thought you were an actual librarian.
Yeah, well, people call me librarian, teacher, census taker.
No, because you just didn't fit the bill of the story you told about your when you were out on Watts and hot pants. And can you tell us that story?
Yeah, I will. Yeah. So I get paroled to California. I'm there for 2 weeks, living at my sister's, got a job, everything, because I always did. I always got a job, always did good, and,
Yeah.
And so I was there for a couple of weeks. I went to my parole officer's office to meet with her, and she was having group with her parolees. And I met a couple of addicts. They were all addicts, but, I met a couple of homegirls, and that was it. We went that night to the Connection and used. And, of course, I went back to my sister's. I don't know what time I got there, but I'm loaded. And my brother-in-law is saying, get her out of here or you go with her. And so anyway, so they kicked me out right away. And that was, I was 25 years old. That was in 1963 is when I got paroled from jail. And I was 25 years old. I went in 23, came out 25. And I started using heroin right away. And, and of course I was on my own. I didn't want to pimp or anything, so I was on my own. I was, learning all the cop places and everything. And anyway, so this one time I went to this with somebody to go cop, and it was a really, it was a broken down house, shack, like it was a shack. And I went in, and there was this blanket like between two rooms, this big blanket, and it was nailed up. So, and then you go beyond that, and it's like a den, and there's people in there, and it's real dark, and they're using and they're nodding out and everything. And I thought, I just felt like heaven.
Yeah, so you ended up at a shooting gallery.
So it was the shooting gallery. I got loaded. I met this guy there. His name was Simpson. And he was a drummer at one time with Hampton Hawes, who was a jazz musician. I was really into jazz and dope. And so I met this guy, and he was a drummer. And this is how he drank. No drums. He had his sticks, and he had a phone book. And that's how he was doing his drumming and nodding out, and so intriguing to me. So that was it. He told me he was in Watts and where he lived and everything. And I think it was the next day I hitchhiked out to Watts, and I get in this cab. And I think maybe I was still living with my sister then. I don't even know where I was living, but I got in a cab, and I asked him to take me to Watts and gave this address, and he said, "Lady, I can't take you to Watts." He said, "I can take you near and drop you off, but I don't know if you know or not, but there's riots going on." And I said, "Well, how close can you get?" And he said, "I'll get as close as I can." So he drove me to Watts. I got out. I don't even remember the rest, except that I ended up at Chuck's house. Mama's house. He lived with his mother, and she was this little black, beautiful, wonderful woman. But anyway, so I ended up in Watts, and I stayed for 6 years after that day.
Wow!
Never left Watts. Could not get off the corner to leave. Never got busted. In the beginning, never got busted. After that, I got busted a lot, but and it was, and then one time Chuck and I got into it about something, and he threw me out the window. We were on a first story, but he threw me out the window, and I remember walking the streets of Watts, and it was raining, and I was crying, and I went back to his house, to the window of his bedroom, and I knocked on the window, and I begged him to please let me back in, and he used to beat me up on a daily basis.
Wow,
and
so wasn't that nice?
I thought if he could get all this anger out, then it'll be, me and him. Because I thought he was just angry about something. If he can get it all out,
Yeah.
And so anyway, he kicked me out. He never let me come back in. And that was the beginning of my life on the streets. And I just slept wherever I could sleep. I ate when anybody would feed me for a year and a half. No job, no income, and you couldn't get on welfare. If you were a man, you could give like a liquor store address or something. But if you were a woman, they would come and investigate whatever house you were staying at, where they were going to send your checks. And I never had a house to stay at, so I never could get any help. And I got beat up daily basis, raped daily basis. I'd go to a hotel. That's usually the only place I could take a shower. Like I turned a trick, and sometimes they would leave and not pay me, and then the hotel guy would come in and say, "You want a few bucks?" And I'd say, "Yeah, I need," and he'd, to turn a trick with him, and sometimes they'd let me sleep for an hour or two and take a shower. Mostly no, because it was like a every half hour hotel kind of thing, and it was just nightmare, when
That is a nightmare.
Sometimes people would take me in, or women, certain streets were nicer than others, and somebody would come out of the house with a paper bag, and maybe there'd be a sandwich in there or something, and so like they would feed me, and I was just a mess, Kevin. I was a mess. I was shooting up in my legs, and I had abscess scars all over the place. And, during that time, around that time, I'd go different rehabs. I'd get busted. They'd take me in, overnight, and then cut me loose again, put me back on the street. And because then they had a charge, they would call it internal possession. So they would check your arms. And if you had tracks, then they would bust you. Then they would take you in.
Really?
It wasn't, it wasn't like, then they would take you in, and then they would, you'd have to urinate and everything. And when they found out you were loaded, that was their proof, you'd get busted. But that's what they called it, internal possession. You didn't have to have any drugs on you or nothing.
Just if you were loaded. So it's basically like a under the influence charge.
Yeah, it was under the influence charge.
Huh. So where did recovery end? How did you get to recovery?
So I would I'd get busted a lot. I mean, I went to maybe 10, 12 halfway houses, three-quarter-way houses. I went twice to a rehab in Venice. It was called To a Mess. It meant it's up to you. And it was like a kickoff of Synanon, but you didn't have to stay there forever. Yeah, I was right down the street from Synanon. You didn't have to stay there forever. So I was there for a couple of years, and I was there a couple of years twice, and got back out on the street, and you were allowed to drink, and the rest was over. And then, but towards the end, it was lots. And so I used to go to this hospital. I got busted. I worked for 3 months, got insurance coverage at some point, went to this hospital. It was a care unit, comprehensive care in California, and they really liked me. I cleaned up, and I'd be, this nice girl and helping everybody. And so anyway, and they let me stay because I used to help all the other patients there, talk to them and everything. So anyway, so one time they said, you need to go into long-term treatment. I said, long-term? I've been in so many treatment programs. And then I said, I've been to 2MS. So this woman that was a counselor there just drove me to Impact in Pasadena. Mm-hmm. And I had nowhere else to go. I mean, I was here and there. I was out of WASP, but I was still getting trouble, living here and there and nowhere, and just lost. I was so lost. And so I got to Impact, and they interviewed me, and he would say things like, oh, well, when you worked at Brotman Memorial, because I told him I worked at this hospital when Michael Jackson got burned. I mean, there was a lot of intriguing things that happened.
Yeah.
And I mean, I'd come up for air every once in a while, and some way I was able to pull it together. And I was a good, kind person in between, even using, I was. Anyway, so that's how I ended up there. And it was long-term treatment. I was there for a year and a half. And the magic happened. And what happened that was so different than any of the other rehabs I was in. Because there were some good rehabs I was in. And I mean, they were all good. I just didn't work it. And so when I got to Impact, it was like no BS. No BS.
But it wasn't like sitting on talk therapy or anything?
No, it was a long-term treatment program. Mm-hmm. It was still funded by the city, the state government. Yeah. There wasn't insurances or anything yet. And it was a rehab that a lot of addicts were the counselors and the staff. And some of them were clean and going to school to become therapists.
KDEC counselors, yeah.
Yeah, so it was a drug treatment that was serious about recovery. And they were serious about going to meetings. Because most recovery houses you go to, a lot of them even now, they'll treat you in certain things and introduce you to some therapy and stuff. But not a lot of them have a plan for you when you leave there. I think that's the fault. Because you have to have a plan when you leave rehab. Because once I opened the door, I had just done all this stuff because the program programmed me to do it. And once I left the door, I didn't know what to do then. I didn't know, there was no van to jump in and go to a meeting. Yeah. So, but this time it was different. And I tell people that you have to have a plan when you leave treatment. Write down, get a calendar, an actual calendar. And for 1 week, write down every meeting you're going to go to that week, starting the first day you're out. Who you're going to call that day, write that name and write their phone number. your sponsor, make a plan for yourself. And there's one treatment plan in Utah here that is putting that in their outpatient treatment plan.
Yeah, they're have that in California now.
Oh, they do, good.
They have, what do they call that? Relapse prevention.
Oh, perfect. Yeah, that is what it is. So I went there, and for the very, very first time, I got a sponsor and started working with that sponsor.
So this was in October, right?
This is October
So that was
81.
the first day you stayed clean was at that program?
Yeah, at that program.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, they just dropped me off. I had a paper bag, and in the paper bag, I don't know. Anyway, I had a paper bag with me, no clothes. The clothes I had on were clothes I got, from whatever. But I had no clothes with me. I had a paper bag with bills in it. I don't know where they sent the bills to, or I had a couple of friends that, you would use their addresses, but I had bills in that paper bag, and I had a cross that was in my mother's casket when she passed away. I don't even know how I got that stuff, why I never lost it along the way.
Wow.
Where was it when I got busted or all, I don't know. But that's what I had when I came in. That's all I had. And they were serious. And at 30 days clean, I knew that if I didn't get it this time, I was going to die. And for the first time, I did not want to die. The other times I thought they would say, oh, you're going to die. You're going to die if you go back out there, at other recovery houses.
Yeah.
And I think, when? When am I going to die?
Yeah, bring it on.
Bring it on. And this time, I didn't. I knew that if I didn't give this my best shot, I was going to die. So I got this woman sponsor, and I got her because she was, at meetings. I would see her every meeting they took us to, and she'd be talking about the program and living life and no BS and all that stuff. And I thought, yeah, she's the woman for me because she's not going to play around with me. And so I got her to sponsor me. I did everything she told me to do. And all the while I did it, definitely for the first year every day, I said, this isn't going to work. This is BS. These people don't know me. One morning they'll be doing checks in the bedroom and I won't be in my bed because I used to escape out the window.
You were a runner also, huh?
I was a runner, yeah. Well, I thought, this is too hard. And these people, when I leave, they're going to want me to stay and call me. The staff's going to call me in the office anyway. So I started to do this program with all my might, and it saved my life. And I mean, the beauty that I see now with my life and how one thing led to another, and the lessons that I have learned to save my life the rest of my life, and to know my purpose. My purpose is to stay clean and to help another addict.
Okay, so this is the part where I started asking you 4-step questions.
Okay.
And one of the biggest things that's perfect segue, what you were just talking about. Tell us about one of your biggest fears in early recovery. Like when you first got clean, did you have a fear?
My fear was I was not going to make it.
That was, yeah.
I didn't trust myself because I would go on programs before. They would say I was their ideal patient, ideal resident, ideal client, all these different places.
Yeah.
The minute I left, I went and used. I mean, I was shucking and jiving, but I didn't think I was. I wasn't trying to impress somebody. I really did their program and thought, this is going to work. And then I'd leave and go use. So this time when I came in, my greatest fear, I remember sitting in a meeting and I thought, they're going to call on me. I don't know what to say and da-da-da, and I'm not going to make it. I'm a phony anyway. I never made it before. My greatest fear was that I was not going to make it. Not even that I was going to die or go somewhere. It was just that I was not going to make it and it was going to continue again. Because a long time before I got here this time, I didn't want to use anymore. I was way past the expiration date.
Yeah, so I mean, we talk about that. You just didn't have the gift of desperation yet. Do you think that?
Well, I think what I did have, one more way of getting drugs.
Yeah.
I I had one more con in me, one more manipulation. My pain inside became so great. This is what happened. My pain inside became so great that I couldn't deal with it anymore. Mm-hmm. I couldn't deal with it. And not that, I'm going to go and I'm going to, make it all better and I'll be able to deal with it. I just didn't know what else to do. And it was almost like my spirit was being carried. The program I was in, again, for the third time, I was at that hospital, and somebody carrying me to Impact and just getting in the van and going with her and then getting to, it was like a crapshoot. I didn't even think, well, maybe it'll work. At 30 days, I thought, just maybe. And then when I got my first year medallion, I said again, wow, maybe it's going to work this time.
Yeah. Yeah, that's cool. So that fear, it sounds like...
I was desperate.
Yeah, so that gift of desperation. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I thought, Roseanne, you cannot go on the street anymore. Having the people I lived with, oh my God.
Yeah, no kidding. So there's like a lot of fears in early recovery for a lot of addicts. Like you said, like, I'm not going to be able to make it. I can't stay clean. Fear of failure is basically the one for me is fear of failure. I was going to get busted and then go do my prison sentence and then die because I knew that's what was going to happen.
Yeah.
But so is there a fear today that you still live with or have that you share with people? So no fears.
I have no fears today.
Yeah.
None. I don't have fear of dying. I don't have a fear of going broke, not having enough money. I don't have a fear of being alone. I've been alone my entire recovery. I've gone through some, couple of major painful times in recovery, and I've made it, and why wouldn't I make it? And I truly believe to my innermost being, and this I've internalized just recently, I thought of this, and that since I came into recovery, even when I was in all the pain and all that stuff, since I walked through the door of recovery, I have gotten everything I've ever needed, when I've needed it, and how I've needed it. And so there's no reason for me to have, fear. And I thought about it, and I thought, well, then why am I afraid sometimes? Or why do I, talk stuff to myself like, oh my, whatever I tell myself sometimes. I think, I just lost my train of thought. I think, then why? If I know that I have gotten everything exactly when I needed, not what I wanted, but what I needed, then why do I have any fears about anything? And I feel because I'm a human being. And humans have fear about just any kind of thing. And I think from that fear, there's lessons and blessings to be learned.
Yeah.
So when I know my life, I get everything I need, and I'm still feeling like insecure, whatever, I know that that's a lesson I'm going to learn. Because everything also, I have been able to look for the lesson or the blessing. And that wasn't always in recovery. That was just the past few years. If something happens, I think, it's almost automatically I'll see the lesson in it. I'll think, oh, yeah, that had to happen to, learn this. I know I'm going to have lessons because I'm human.
Great perspective. That is great perspective. So just the one fear in early recovery and basically no fears today. So also, what about a reservation? Tell us about a reservation you had when you first got clean. Or if you had more than one reservation.
Well, I think reservations that I had, I think the reservations that kept taking me out were, I abandoned my children. I told you that when they were 3 and 2 years old. And, that kept me using for a long time.
So what was the reservation? Or was that like you kept getting loaded because of the shame and guilt? So was there a reservation, like if this happens, I'm going to go back out and get loaded? You know, a lot of people like if something happens to my kid or my parents or whatever.
Well, I did have a period of time that I had planned a suicide. I had 25 years clean at the time, and I came out to Utah to be with my sister. My sister was the one in California. My sister was always there for me. Mm-hmm. She was the only one that would come to jail, put money on my books, and she would always say, "Oh, Roseanne, this time, honey, you're going to do really great. You're going to get a job. You're going to get an apartment." I mean, that was her favorite words to me. So she was the one person that always believed in me. And so I moved out to Utah to be with her. I used to come out and visit, and she'd cry every time and say, "Oh, I'm never going to see you again." And she was a heavy smoker, and it was pretty evident that, you know, she's not going to live forever, and, you know, and she was getting sick, just no energy, not feeling good, and smoking. So anyway, and so she would cry. So the one time I came out to visit her, and I thought, you know, she cried, and she said, "Oh, I'm never going to see you again." And I went back home to Florida, and I thought about it, and I talked to my sponsor, and I thought, you know what? This is my sister. I love her more than anybody in the world. And so I, you know, did what I had to do, tie up things, loose ends in Florida, and I came out to Utah to be with her. Now, she had a husband, she had kids, but we had that special thing, and so we hung out. We hung out for about 8 years. It was great. She was still a heavy smoker. Her lungs were getting, you know, not too good, and so I went to the doctors with her one day to, you know, her follow up, and she was diagnosed with stage 4 cancer. Mm-hmm. And she had 3 months to live, and I was so happy that I was with her, because that's why I came out here, to be with her. But I couldn't think of how the end would look like. But anyway, so I moved in with her for a while because she wanted me there by her side, and so I moved in with them, her and her husband, and we ended up at the end. You know, she died like 2.5 months later and passed away, And I kept thinking, all during that time, you know, I kept thinking, "Oh, what am I going to do when my sister's gone? She's my only go-to.
Yeah.
She knows me better than anybody. She believes me." And I thought, well, you know what? I've been clean for 25 years. My life is wonderful. I'm just going to get some dope in Vegas when she goes, and I'm going to take it, and I'm going to make sure I get enough to do the trick, because I didn't want to just use. I wanted to die when she was gone. And I thought, I'll write a letter to everybody, all my girls and friends, and tell them that, you know, I know you all understand me, because everybody knows how close I am to my sister, and that I just don't want to live anymore. I had a full life. I'm grateful. I'm
This is at 25 years clean?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
This was like, this was when I moved out here. This was like, well, it was, she died in 2013. Mm-hmm. So that was how many years ago?
Don't ask me to do math.
12.
Okay.
Yeah. So anyway, I moved out when I had 25 years clean, and this was 8 years later. So I had 33 years clean at that time. And that was it. I was going to go to Vegas or get somebody to go, whatever, just cop and treat the person with me, because I wanted to make sure they came back with good stuff. Yeah, just
crazy thoughts.
Crazy thoughts. And so I was with her, and we moved her in the room I was in sleeping, so we slept together, and never had sleep deprivation. Whenever her husband could be home and he was, you know, with it, I would go to a meeting, you know, I made sure. And so we had hospice come and, you know, do certain things, but then they would go but, you know, I would spend every day with her, you know, 24/7 for a few months. And, you know, I would brush her hair, and I would, you know, lotion her down with, you know, lotions, and I was always going shopping to buy her pretty nightgowns and stuff, and just spent a lot of time with her, talking to her and playing music, and just a lot of memories I would share with her, and And I'd be up with her because during the night she'd cough a lot and I'd have to sit her up in bed. I remember sitting next to her and putting my leg behind her back so my leg could hold her. But it was never uncomfortable, never sleep deprivation, never. And there were nights I was awake all night. And I thought about what a beautiful time it was spending with her.
Yeah.
And then I thought, Roseanne, this is one of the greatest gifts that Tony has given you, for you to be able to be with her. She called for me. She wanted me with her, And God chose me to be with her, to be there at her transition, to helping her, doing whatever. I was with her. And then I knew that is the reason I'm here. Because I always said, I'm there to be with my sister and we'll hang out and everything. But I knew that day that was the reason I was there. And I thought, I can't do myself in. I'd spoil all of this.
Right?
And then the next day she passed.
Yeah, so the whole process was really pretty, sounds very therapeutic for you.
It was, I'll tell you what I learned as far as program goes. We always say, many of us have said, a grateful addict will never use. I mean, I heard that when I got here and I thought, oh my God, I thought it was terrible that my sponsor said that to me. And, but you hear it over and over again. And I thought, yeah, grateful addict, you're not going to use it if you're feeling gratitude. But I never really felt that. I believed it and I spoke it and I shared it, but I never had internalized it like I did that night with my sister. Wow. I felt a grateful addict will never use. Because I was so grateful that night, I got in touch with that. I thought, I can't go back out. I blow all this. And I internalized that day what that meant.
That's awesome. That's a great story. So that reservation's gone then.
That reservation's gone because that was my reservation for several years.
Well, it sounds like up till that day.
Yeah, it was up until that day.
Oh, we're gonna take a break.
Okay.
Okay, so your sister passed. You don't have that reservation anymore, which is a good segue to go into resentments. So when you what resentment did you carry for a very long time that you have overcome today? Like a lot of people have resentment for like family members or parents or the police, institutions, stuff like that.
I'm thinking.
Siblings. Like I resented my parents for at least a year or two when I got clean, and most of my life because of the just the chaos that went on in my life. But after working some steps, realizing that they didn't have any teachers either. Just kind of like what you said. That's all they knew.
Well, I think I don't know. I just think that. I think there was a lot of frustrations and maybe I think resentments is extremely harsh. And I don't know whether I can't bring myself to having, reservations or I think too quickly, like with my mom. I mean, I had to give up my daughter for adoption. She didn't want to hear anything about it and didn't. And I felt really hurt about that. Okay. And I didn't understand it. And maybe that was a reservation. Or a resentment. But I just don't see it as that, I guess what I call it is I was disappointed. I was sad, And I guess all of that, probably adds up to resentment.
Well, there's it's different for absolutely everybody. And so the perception I might have about a resentment that I would carry is different from a perception that you would have.
Right.
So like the degree of resentment is probably really, really like soft and low for you. You know, could be.
Yeah.
Disappointment could be part of that, like you said.
Yeah.
So it's just somebody else's perception is different.
Yeah. I think growing up, I just think growing up was, I don't know. You know, it's kind of hard to think of certain things now because I understand so much more.
Yeah, that's hard.
And I've been so forgiving. But of course, there must have been resentments in order to forgive something, you know. But I just can't, I really can't make it up. You know, just like my sponsor thought I would have this big resentment towards my mother because I had to give up my baby. I mean, that's the one prominent thing that I looked at, and I thought, you know, no, she did the best she could. Mm-hmm. You know, and I wrote the inventory about my mother, did a mother inventory. And I wrote because that's what I was searching for, to see if I had a resentment, to see if I was harboring any, you know, deep thoughts.
Yeah.
I think that, I mean, some things, I guess, when I came into recovery, when I came into Impact, because that's when I really came into recovery and got real and everything, I resented some people because I didn't think they understood me or believed me, like, you know, oh, you're Pollyanna or you think everything's great. Well, that is what I thought and what I felt. You know, I'm not going to conjure some ugly things because somebody says something's ugly. I can see things where people have resentments, and I don't judge them for having them. I understand it, you know.
Okay.
Yeah. I don't know, Kevin. It
sounds like your change of perception over the years has like softened all the resentments.
Mm-hmm. I just
that
understand.
makes it hard. Yeah, it just makes it hard to go back and pinpoint, oh, this is a resentment. I know exactly what you're talking about too, because I've done the same thing. It's like,
Yeah.
But I had to it's interesting because just doing this podcast and over, each episode going back to like childhood or whatever, going, oh, I remember having a resentment at that time, but I don't resent now.
Yeah.
And so it's hard to look back at that and still have those feelings.
Yeah.
It's interesting though. So resentments, fears, reservations. I know growing up, you talked a lot about some of your childhood and your teenage years. Did you have any shame and guilt growing up? Like when you got to recovery and it was Impact, you look back on your life and you feel the shame and guilt, or did you have parts of using around that?
When I came in, I was filled with shame and guilt. I was filled with it because of abandoning my children for drugs. Even though I've done so much work and I understand that I'm hopelessly bad. I'm not hopelessly bad, but I'm critically ill, as our literature says. I know that and I've accepted that. But that still doesn't mean that it was right. I mean, it wasn't right, even though it was done by a person that was sick. It's just as bad as by a person that, you know what I mean, that wasn't so sick. I mean, it's not a good thing. And I have pain from that. I don't know if it's, I don't think that I'm as critical with myself as I was before.
Good.
I mean, I think that I've let go a lot of that I believe more and more that I did it because I was so sick. And this one thing that I'd like to share that my sponsor helped me with, and that is, and I've done this like when I've done H&I at the penitentiary because I've been with women, and whenever we talk about children, I mean, it's all over. Everybody's in pain and thinking about their kids and what they did and everything, especially at an H&I in jail. And so, you know, I would tell my story. I would share different things about leaving my kids. And I mean, it's so horrendous to hear from some people that don't understand the whole process yet. You know what I mean? That haven't even gotten near forgiveness or whatever.
Yeah.
That when I say it, I always say, when I share that, I always say, listen, that doesn't mean it was right. And that doesn't mean that I don't feel pain behind it now. And that doesn't mean that I wish it could have been different and not happen at all. But I can deal with it more because there's some things I've gotten out, you know. But I tell them, I say, okay, what I want you to do, I said something that really helped me and helps me. What I want you to do is close your eyes right now. And I've done this at meetings, at 1 or 2 meetings. And I say, just close your eyes right now. And think of the last time, or some of the times when you were out there that were so low down that you can't even believe that you did some of those things, like hurting yourself. And we don't even care about hurting ourselves, but hurting other people. And you abandoned your kids, you left them, you whatever. Just think about that. Sit with that just for a few seconds.
Yeah.
And then I say, open your eyes. And ask yourself, you don't have to answer me, but ask yourself, would you do that today? Being clean, even if it's a week clean, even if you're in jail and you have 4 days clean or 2 weeks clean, would you do that today? And their tears are running down their face. Mm-hmm. And they say, no, never. And that was one of the things that started, you know, I wasn't even aware that it started some forgiveness with, you know, with myself, but that was one of the things.
That's really heavy. That's pretty good.
That started to help me, you know, and then of course when I had 6 years clean, there's, you know, the basic text, and then on page 16 or 17, 16 at the top of the page, in the first or second paragraph, it says, we were not hopelessly bad, but we were critically ill. Mm-hmm. We did those things because we were sick, not that it's okay, and not that we don't have to atone for it or amends for it.
Hey, I want to ask you this, because you referenced a quote out of the book. Mm-hmm. Have you ever had, like, remember a quote out of the basic text, and then, like, years later, there's been so many revisions that it's no longer on the page that you thought it was on? Has that ever come? It came up for me. Well,
it's
just funny.
I do a lot of thinking. One of my biggest character defects is overthinking. Because all my thinking isn't bad, but
the revisions in the basic text are necessary.
In the basic text.
I feel that they are.
Well, one day when I tell this story about it, because that's the only thing I can really, there's another thing in Living Clean that I'm absolutely in love with, and that came later.
Yeah.
I looked in the 3rd edition, the 4th edition, the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th, and they're all on the same page.
Oh, that's good. That's good.
I think I looked in the 2nd, but I know the 3rd, 4th, 5th, and 6th, they're all on page 16.
Oh, good. Yeah,
I only did it one time for that. I don't even know why I did it, because I'm so anal, but yeah.
So I have another question for you. Mm-hmm. There's been a lot of us that come into the program that we come in with consequences that carry over into our clean time. Some could be health, some could be legal, financial, whatever. Do you have consequences of your past that you still have to live with today? I mean, you've been clean for so long, you would think that all those are gone by now, because you've been clean for, 100 years?
No, I've been clean for 43 years. But yes, there are some consequences. And one of the consequences is I abandoned my children when they were 3 and 2, and my son committed suicide when he was 18, and I never got the chance to face make an amends to him or talk to him The day that I left him when he was 3 years old is the very last day that we were in each other's presence. And then at 18, when I was in Tumest, this TC, is when I got the call that he committed suicide.
Oh, no.
And no drugs. He wasn't involved in drugs. He was brilliant. He just, I don't know. I don't know.
The pain.
Pain.
Yeah, we know that pain, right?
We know
So
that pain.
let's take a quick break, and we'll come back to consequences. For the listeners, if you hear that buzzing in the background, that's the oxygen tank for Roseanne. So we'll be right back. Thanks for being patient, my friends. We are back. So we were talking about you having like a pretty bright outlook on all this stuff. So your progress in recovery, we can get to the point where we can talk about your assets. And today, are your assets different from when you were clean, or first clean?
Oh, yes.
Okay, let's have it.
Well, when I first got clean, I was struggling, and I was a very, very sick woman. I was filled with disease. I was not my normal being. I had drugs had created this other person, and that's how I was operating and dealing. I didn't know anything about assets and about giving and caring and being considerate. I had come in with, I get mine, you get yours. Excuse me. And just surviving, just worrying about Roseanne and getting the next one. And I never thought about, being considerate towards another person. Now, with that said, before I put anything in my system, I was very considerate. And I was very loving and very caring, even as a young kid,
Yeah.
I was a good person. And what I was telling you earlier is that along the way, I have a concept in my mind about Narcotics Anonymous, about healing and uncovering, helping me and teaching me how to uncover and remove all that degradation and the ugliness of the addiction. And it taught me, it gave me, perspective of how to change all that, how to remove all that. It became a bright light for me, new world. I entered a new world when I walked into NA. And it gave me tools to uncover a lot of what the disease left me with.
So are you saying that you reverted back to that loving, caring? I knew where you're going. That was so cool.
Yeah. Well, do you want me to continue?
Yeah, please.
So somewhere along the way, the past few years, 5 or 6 years, I have really gotten in touch. I have received many gifts, and they just keep coming and blessings. And I also think one of the greatest gifts is the way I see life.
Oh, your perspective.
My perspective.
I love it.
And so when I got here for a long time, I felt I got here, I was hope to die dope fiend, and I say that because it expresses some things of the way I was when I got here in a few short words. Because today I'm 85 years old, and I have white hair, platinum, and I don't look like that person. So
you're looking good, I tell you that.
So I want people to, kind of, oh yeah, she is an addict, But this is what I believe. And to me, this is my most beautiful story that I feel and that I love to share with somebody that will listen. And so when I got here, I thought I was a hope to die dope fiend, and I was so sick, and I was abused, and, wasn't loved for a long time. It didn't have any normalcy in my life, and the way many, many, many of us feel, and I know that. And So what started happening is, I got the sponsor and she got me into the steps and everything. But one day I sat and I kind of looked at my whole life in recovery. My whole life before and after recovery, and what transpired and how it transpired. And I started connecting some dots, and I started looking at, just looking at my gifts in depth. I started looking at things. It was like I woke up one day with a different interest. Mm-hmm. And it also was about the time that I started losing vision.
Wow, yeah.
I'm going to talk about that. I'm going to talk about a gift I received one day. And after that gift, I don't know, my perspective really has changed in a just a beautiful, blessed way. Okay. And fearless. And I was listening to YouTube one day, and a man was interviewing another man. And he said, "What is the first thing people do when they pray?" He said, "What is the one thing people do when they pray?" And the guy said, "I don't know." And he said, "They close their eyes. They close their eyes so they can make that connection." And I heard what he said, and after the podcast, I was listening, thinking about it, and I thought, oh my gosh. And I called my sponsor and I said, "Oh, Becky." And she said, "What did you hear now?" And I told her about, the podcast and people close their eyes. And I said, "Becky." And when I said that to her, that's the first time I believed that and saw it that way. I said, "You know what? I don't think God causes blindness, but I think he uses blindness as an opportunity to teach me and to remove all the distractions so I can get closer to him." And I said to her, I said, "So you know what? I've really been gifted. God has blessed me with taking some of my vision away or that happening to me." I said, "Because I don't focus on outside things that much anymore."
Wow.
It doesn't matter.
That's
I walk in a
powerful.
meeting. I don't know who's in the meeting.
Because you can't see.
And it doesn't matter who's in the meeting. So what happens, instead of me looking around, checking someone's hair out, or who's doing who, or who's with who, or who came in late, or who didn't, I'm sitting there listening.
Yeah.
So I'm listening, but what am I really listening for? Why am I listening and not looking and everything? Well, I'm listening because when I hear so-and-so say they did this and that, I think, oh, yeah, I did this and that. And then they say, well, and I did this and that too. And I think, oh, yeah, I did this and that too. So I'm listening at another level, which connects me to all of them. Mm-hmm. So if I'm connected to you and I did the same things you did, and blah, blah, I'm not going to criticize you or put you down. I'm just listening.
Yeah.
And because of this, I've gotten so much closer to my higher power. And I'm stronger. I'm stronger, and I'm going inside. I see my strength is coming from inside because there's nothing around me to give me that peace, give me that satisfaction. I'm not reaching out to outside things. So my value has, not that anything was ever wrong before, but my value has switched. My needs are switched.
Yeah.
I don't need certain things. And I think that sight is overrated. Because we'll drive through a beautiful, beautiful country and we'll see something, and 5 minutes later it's gone. We don't see it anymore. But it was good for the moment,
Yeah.
And so this is what I believe. I believe that, and it all started around this time, and I was diagnosed with, two diseases that cause blindness approximately 10 years ago. And at the time I could drive, I could still see, I wasn't having that much problems yet. And that's where all it started, I started losing vision. It was very, very gradual. And I got gifts along the way. And one of the gifts, I said to my friend, one of the main things that I lost, one of the first main things I lost is I couldn't see people's faces. Mm-hmm. And I was at a meeting and my very BFF was sitting right across from me. And all of a sudden it happened that quick, overnight, and I couldn't see his face. But I knew it was him. So after the meeting, I went outside and I said, "Jerry, I can't see your face. And he said, you can't really? I said, no, I can't see your face. I can see the outline of it, but I can't see your face. And I couldn't see anybody's faces in the room. And he said to me, oh my God, Roseanne. He said, can you imagine when someone asks you to speak and you're walking across the stage to the podium with your seeing eye dog? Can you imagine what an impact that would be? I said, Jerry, I love you. I don't like that impact. I don't want to have a seeing eye dog. I said, but what I realized after I thought about it and I listened, that I can teach people. There's some people that I can touch, that other people can't touch. And not that I'm any special or different, but I can touch people in another way, you know. And so I just started to be grateful. I started to be grateful for the way I was seeing things, and I can't see. You know what I mean? I just started, it was just another level. It
sounds like a inward journey.
It was. So how I started to look at this fellowship, because I really listen at meetings, and I listen for that purpose. I want to hear where I can identify with them or what they can tell me new.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm listening for now. I go on their journey with them. It's like I was right there with them, you know.
I love that you bring that up. Just the whole sight thing about listening at meetings. Don't know why or how it started. I probably from me having a resentment for something. And I was told to close my eyes. And this was like 15, 16, 17 years ago, right about when I was starting to work with Steve, sponsorship. And I started closing my eyes at meetings. And they said, close your eyes and listen for the message. If you open your eyes, you're going to find something to distract you. And so I've been closing my eyes for like 15, 16 years now at meetings. And every once in a while I get made fun of, like, hey, Kevin, wake up. Are you sleeping?
Yeah.
Or, you know, something like that, which I laugh at too. It's all in fun. But I've been doing it for so long, and I've been around people for so long at meetings that every once in a while, like, I'll, straighten out my back and open my eyes for a second and look around, and I see one or two guys that I sponsor have their eyes closed. And I go, shit, it's powerful because it really, really works. We hear the message when we're not distracted. Yeah, so I love that you shared that story. It means a lot to me.
Thank you.
And you brought up Jerry too, which it's God damn it. I want to cry.
It's okay to cry. When you cry, that is higher power sprinkling water on you so you can grow.
Yeah. I remember talking to you about grief too, and you said grief is just love with no place to go, and
it's the cost of love.
Yeah. I think it was like 10 years ago, we were here in the same Airbnb at the same convention, and Jerry was here. We were all in Shannon, and we were all having dinner. When we were sharing a meal together, and we got to talk about him and I and you. We talked about our spiritual path and where it led us to. And with, we talk about spirituality and what we believe on this podcast. So I was just getting started in Buddhism, and then Jerry passed away. So I have his, the sticker that Shannon gave me about Jerry's quote in the lotus flower on my computer.
Perfect.
Yeah, so I see it every time I sit down for work, and my suffering is holy, and I'll always remember that. So that's a shout out to our friend Jerry who has passed.
Yeah.
Sorry for that.
No, so just one quick thing about listening, and then I want to go back to where I was. And that is listening also. When I got here, I thought I knew everything, whatever. And anyway, so my sponsor guided me into listening. It's the short version. So she guided me into listening. And I remember going into a room, and I had to call her and tell her what I heard. And I went to a meeting, and there was this biker dude at the podium. And I thought, oh, bikers don't stay clean, So I was going to just diss him. And I thought, no, I've got to call my sponsor. So anyway, the first message in several years that I ever heard it in Narcotics Anonymous was from that biker dude. And I love him for that. And he said, if you don't ask your higher power in the morning to help you stay clean and thank your higher power at night, you're going to go back out, you're going to use, and you're going to die. And that's exactly what my sponsor told me would happen to me if I didn't listen. So I went home and I thought about that, and I thought, why didn't I ever hear that before? And I started to think about meetings that I had been to, and I thought, well, I went to the meeting, and they started with the opening prayer. And then there was a closing prayer. Mm-hmm. What happened in between? And I thought, what happened in between is I was listening to my head, and my head said, screw this, and I would split. And that was probably the day I would go back out and use again because I wasn't listening. So when I started to listen, and I listened vigilantly, only because I had to call my sponsor and tell her what I heard some amazing things. And I started to think, wow, I really missed out. I never heard, that the first one will get you loaded. I never heard that how this program works, honesty, open-mindedness, and willingness. I better listen. I started getting excited because there were new things coming in. People would say, Roseanne, forget everything you knew. It's all BS. And I would say, how do you do that? I mean, how do you forget anything that you knew? You knew it, you know. And my sponsor said, you know how you do it, Roseanne? By listening. And she said, you listen, and when something clicks inside. And I said, yeah, I know that feeling. And she said, well, one old thought goes, and a new thought comes in. And that's how you forget everything you knew. And I said, what was the old thought that went out? She said, Roseanne, you don't need to know. So anyway, so I started to listen more and more. And then one day I remember, and I realized I was in a room, and I was so messed up. I don't even know what it was. It was just a newcomer mess up. I was messed up. And I went in the room, and there was a person sharing, and I didn't want to listen to them because, the same thing over and over again. But I was listening because I had a call sponsor.
And you had your eyes closed?
And yes, I did. And so I was listening, and they said something phenomenal. And I thought, how did they know I needed to hear that? And then I thought, I don't even know that dude. And then I thought, and he probably doesn't even know I'm in this room. But my higher power does.
Yeah.
And that's when I started to believe. Not only that my higher power works through people, but that I had a higher power. So to me, listening is so important,
That's heavy.
And I tell that story a lot. And I told it the other night. I knew there were a bunch of newcomers there. And I said, listen, for you people that have heard my story about listening over and over and over and over again, please don't judge me tonight, because I guarantee you there's one person in this meeting that never heard this story.
Yes. Yeah, I've heard you say that.
Yeah. So, but anyway, what I want to say about the magic of this program and everything. So, I believed always for a long time when I got here, I was this hope to die, and I was suffering, and I needed some help. And then one day I was just looking at my journey, and I had this insight, and that when I got here, my spirit was dying. And I believe that when I was born a beautiful, perfect, loving child of God. I didn't always believe that, but, I believed that. And when I was 14, and I put the first chemical in my body, it tarnished my spirit. And to explain my spirit, you can look at it like it's a heart, and it's a golden heart. It's solid gold heart. That's my spirit. And when I started to use, it started to tarnish. And it got faded, and it got really ugly looking. And so it wasn't bright and beautiful anymore. So when I got here, I had my spirit. Now, my spirit is really me, Roseanne, the person.
Yeah.
And so when I got here, my spirit was all a mess. So in the first step, I learned that I had a disease. That was the most powerful thing I learned. I mean, I learned about, manageability and all that, but I needed to know I was a sick person when I got here, and that I needed a lot of help. So that was my first step. So, and then my second and third, and, I started learning about a higher power and everything. And then I got to my fourth step, and I sat there and I wrote everything that was inside of me, everything that I could remember. I wrote and I wrote and wrote all the ugly things.
The first time?
Oh, yeah, the first time.
First time, disclosure.
My first full disclosure.
Wow, I couldn't do that.
Because I knew I was going to die if I didn't. Wow. And remember, I was 42 years old, Kevin.
Yeah.
I mean, not that has anything to do with
Well, it kind of does,
So this spirit is now on this journey. I brought the spirit through the doors of Narcotics Anonymous. And the first thing I had to learn was how sick I was and how much help I needed. So I go along and I start learning some things, and then I get to the fourth step. And what I learned in the fourth step is how to uncover a lot of the mess that was covering my spirit, that golden heart. And I had to really see it, and I thought, oh my gosh. And as I saw it and as I shared it, my heart, the golden heart, would get a little brighter.
Cleaner.
One spot would be shiny. And then I kept going on that same path, over and over and over again. And my spirit got brighter and more beautiful. And then I started learning some things that if you wanted to stay this beautiful, there's some things you can do, Because I don't want to do the same thing over and over again, but that was all I knew. So I was going to do it over and over again. It was going to get messy again. So I started learning the spiritual principles. And then my spirit got brighter and brighter and more beautiful. And then I came to the 10th step. And the 10th step taught me, Roseanne, you better continue on this path. So this beautiful, beautiful spirit continues to grow.
Yeah.
And continues to get more beautiful and to continue to release some of that negativity and that disease. And then I get to the 11th step where I really get to meet the power that's been working in my life all my life. And so I can express my gratitude and show what that relationship is like and build on that relationship, because now I have my BFF there. And then I learned how to sit and what to do with all these gifts I've been given. And then I realize, Roseanne, I look in the mirror, you are that beautiful, perfect, loving child of a higher power.
That's awesome.
And then I have to continue with everything I've learned. And I do that in the 12th step by giving everything I've learned to others so that I can keep getting more lessons. So I can give those lessons out again.
Yeah, we are teachers, huh? Whether we want to or not. Sometimes I don't see myself as a teacher or a mentor at all, because the internal voice in my head says that I'm not worthy, or I'm not enough. But when I do the 2-foot drop and drop into my heart, I feel the same way as you do. Like, we're human, and that is not an excuse for poor behavior, but we do have character defects, and we're working on it. That's why we call it a practice. We're always practicing.
Always.
Yeah.
And sharing with one another.
Yeah, I love that. And I love how you use the 12 steps to walk you through that journey, to clean up your spirit.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool. That's a really good one. Well, normally at this point in the podcast, we would ask you, like, what's one of the craziest stories of your life that you want to share with us? I always like the story about you walking on Watts in the hot pants and the high heels and that story. But do you have another one of your favorites?
That is really my favorite.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is really
That's
my
what
favorite.
got my attention when the first time we picked your CD to share it at NCCNA. just the fact that you were this white girl walking the streets in Watts with hot pink hot pants on, and I don't remember the fishnet stockings or something. And then you got clean. It's a beautiful story. And I say it a lot that you're the best sponsor-in-law in the world, because you've been sponsoring my wife for over 17 years. There was a little bit of competition there when Steve was my sponsor, and I had Vicky for a sponsor-in-law too. Unfortunately, Steve passed, which is kind of full circle that you became Vicky's sponsor now.
Right.
A little bit before he passed, which was amazing. So it's all in the family now.
Right. Yeah.
Well, thank you very much, Roseanne. I sure appreciate you doing this.
Well, Kevin, it's been an honor. It really has been an honor to just share my journey. It just makes me feel once again, the gifts I've been given and how lucky I am and how lucky we all are. And I mean, sometimes I think, what did I do to deserve all this? And I was born. Beautiful, perfect, loving child of God. And I'm there again.
Yeah. I feel the same way. So I love you.
I love you more.
And thanks again.
Thanks, honey.
All right, everybody. I hope you enjoyed the episode.
Thank you for listening, and we hope you enjoyed the episode. Often you will hear addicts referring to a specific 12-step program or rehab. These are personal stories. We do not represent any of the programs.